Welcome to the Love Pod, where inspiration, vision, and real connection come alive. Wherever you are, you belong here.
Welcome to the Love Pod, everyone. I'm your host, Nathaniel. I'm so pleased to welcome a special guest today, Dr. Lisa Campbell, who is all about growth, who is about empowering women to step into their power, who is just such a wonderful energy and presence. Lisa, I'm so thrilled to have you on the podcast today. I know we were talking briefly about what gets in our way and holds us back from living the life that we're meant to live. And I'm just so thrilled to have you on the show. So I'd love to just ask you to introduce yourself a bit more to our audience. Tell us, why do you do what you do?
First of all, Nathaniel, thank you so much for having me here today. I always count it a blessing where I'm in the space with others who are bringing our voices alive to the world in an unscripted manner, right? This is not a
Yeah.
reality show. This is like real life, but
It's
very
the reality
simply.
show. Pardon me.
Wait, if I start dancing, then maybe so.
Yeah.
But very simply, I like to start off with this. First of all, I am 53 years young.
Oh, wow. I would have
I
never guessed.
don't look 53. And the reason that I'm looking this way, some people will say, oh, it's genetics. But the reality is, after working in healthcare for about 30 years, I was working full time as a consultant with my own business, then working full time as a professor online, right? So it's kind of like that nice
Mhm.
balance. And one day, I realized that I was no longer aligned with the organization. I was no longer aligned with the department that I was in. And very slowly, new leadership started picking at me, right?
Mm,
Just for no reason. And
mm,
so it was during those moments when I realized that it was time for me to go and I needed to go so that I could grow. And I know you mentioned that I work with women. I do. However, what I've discovered working with women simultaneously helps their partner
mm,
because you can't help but absorb the energy that is the end result of working with a coach,
mm.
right? And so I like to say all the time, my husband says, don't psychoanalyze me. I'm like, first off, I am not a therapist. I have a PhD in human services with a specialization in healthcare administration. So I'm
Mm.
not a therapist, but I do a lot of reading and I have done a ton of self work because I realized that there were things that I experienced that I needed to let others know so I don't take that pain and that hurt to the
Mm.
grave. And so I quit my full-time job. I closed that healthcare consulting business and focused on being a full-time speaker and growth coach. And it has
Mm.
been the best decision that I ever made in my entire 53 years on earth. And I know you're like, why do you keep saying 53, right? Because I think a lot of people think that our lives are over when we
Mm.
get to 50. And for me, my life is just beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I would have never guessed you're 53. But also just the sentiment, right? I remember listening to one of Louise Hay's speeches when on her 80th birthday. She's like, "This is going to be my best decade ever." And I feel like this is so important, that attitude. Like I could sense it right when you came on, Lisa. Like you're beaming, and I know you're not even feeling that well today, so I can't even. You just be like shining me out of the screen here if you're like feeling 100%. And I feel like people need to hear this, growth. I mean, let's talk a little bit about growth and why coaching with growth in particular, and the journey that took you there, because I feel like growing is one of those things that like we've all heard this before, some of the bigger names, they say you're either growing, you're dying, but this is a principle that's inherent in all of life. There's this continuous growth on all these dimensions of ourselves, right? So what made you want to focus on that?
Absolutely. So some would say it was menopause, but others would say that I was comfortable with the identity that I had. Like, it was like, oh, I'm president and CEO of Physician Practice Resources Incorporated, right? That became my identity. Teaching
Mm,
medical coding online, that became my identity. And while I was good at it, my life, my mindset was fixed.
mm,
So Dr. Carol Dweck, who is the author of Mindset, right? She talks about having a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And I realized that my mindset was kind of mixed because some areas I was growing in, others I wasn't. And so once I realized that I needed to become comfortable being uncomfortable, that's when that journey began. And actually, oftentimes I say it was when I quit that job 3 years ago, but as I reflected, it really started happening 7 years ago,
mm,
but I wasn't in a place to hear that that's what was happening to me. And so once I got it, I got it. Was I afraid? Absolutely, right?
mm.
Like quitting your job where you're getting paycheck every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You got your vacation, you got your 401k, all the things. I was comfortable. And one day I realized, what if I just closed the door on that version of my life, stepped into the middle, which is like, there's this author, I can't think of his name, but he wrote a book called Transitions. And in the book, he talks about 3 stages, right? Closing the door, the neutral zone, and then the new beginning.
Mm,
Well, the neutral zone, which I like to also call the messy middle, is really where you sink or swim. It's like
mm,
your mindset has to guide your mindset, your heart set has to guide how you experience that journey. And there were days where I said, let me go back on the other side of this door. And then immediately my heart was like, no, Lisa, let's keep going. Let's keep going this
yeah.
way. So 3 years later, I'm still here, still smiling. And I have this level of peace
Mm,
that you can't pay for. You know how, Nathaniel, how you go to bed, like especially if you have little kids, right? So you go to bed, you put your head on a pillow, but you went to sleep, but you're not really
mm,
resting.
mhm,
And now I'm able to rest without all of this stuff in my big
mm,
old head.
mhm. Yeah. I mean that feeling of peace, and I think it's really attached to fulfillment, and fulfillment I think is really attached to growth, right? When we're moving forward towards something, we're not just in this pattern, the cyclical pattern that so many human beings find themselves in security being the primary need that so many of us are trying to fulfill. But then a lot of us are conditioned, I think, for multiple reasons to just prioritize that the most, like security and certainty. Whereas there's all these other human needs that are fundamental. And a big one of them, I think, is growth, and the other one is contribution. And I think those two are really they're really intertwined, right? Because when you're really growing, you're contributing to others. It's hard to grow within yourself without actually impacting and shining your light on others and being a blessing to others. And so I think it's really interesting that you also brought up identity. Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because this is kind of a topic of the times in terms of like, I hear a lot of this in the buzz in entrepreneurship, in terms of like, the manifestation spaces. Also, we were talking about children too, and parents and the roles of parents. And I think that we can take on a lot of sometimes identities that are not necessarily our own. And like the fact that you were saying like, you even at the beginning, we weren't recording, but you were saying like, that version of you that's been talking to you poorly, and you use my name, like that Nathaniel hasn't been kind to you for 10 years. Is that really what you want to keep? And that's a really interesting um, contemplation and ponderance for people. Is like, oh, we can actually look at our identity and like, who are we really? And I feel like a lot of people are asking these questions, and it's leading to more deeper growth in all areas of life.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that you said was about being a parent. So if I think back on these years of my life, I was a daughter, a granddaughter, a niece, a parent, then a spouse. I was a healthcare leader. I was volunteering with my professional association. And all of those things I thought contributed to who Lisa is.
Mm,
Yes, in some shape, form, or fashion, but that didn't mean that I needed to hold on to
mm,
that identity until I die. And what really made me realize this is that my grandfather was 52 when I was born.
mm,
I was 52 when he died. So he died
Oh,
at
wow.
104.
Wow.
And when I think about his life from being in the military to then working for the US Post Office, then working for a funeral home, he kept pivoting, which allowed him to live his life to the fullest and wasn't tied to those certain identities. And back
Mm,
then, I knew what identity meant, but I didn't realize that the identities that many of us hold on to, we hold on to them like a security blanket
mhm,
because that's what we're so used to.
mhm,
And once you let go of them, two things happen. One, you will experience some transitioning internally, which will then, the byproduct will be external change. And sometimes you have to let people know that you used to seeing this different version of me, and that's no longer how I identify. So, like for me, everyone in healthcare knew me as the medical coding expert. I still have people texting me today, and I have my text, my response in my notes portion, so I can just copy and paste it. It starts like, "Thank you for thinking of me. I am no longer really involved in medical coding. At this time, I don't have anyone to refer to you, but that's just not what I do." And then they respond like, "Oh my gosh, you're," and then after we have a couple of text dialogues, they're like, "You know what? You have been motivating us all for a very long
mm,
time.
mm,
And I'm happy that you were brave enough to let go because the many of them are not willing to let go, and I was."
mm. And that's such a can be such an ignition for others. I mean, people call it like permission, giving others permission to take their leaps. And I think it really does do something when we have the courage to go all in on our unique purpose and why we're here. And even if it's into the unknown and without complete certainty of what that purpose is, I feel like, one of the things always stuck with me is Eckhart Tolle talks about purpose, and a lot of us think purpose is this big grandiose thing we must complete and accomplish, but a lot of it comes down to these subtleties that you're talking about with identity. And it's like, how are you serving that cup of tea? How are you listening to your children or waving hi to a neighbor? How are you, greeting the cashier at the grocery store? And I feel like all these ways that our purpose can be deeper than our superficial level of identity and showing up with our hearts and our full presence, right? And in whatever language we want to say. So I really think that's beautiful feedback from people who have known you and have seen your gifts all along. I feel like that's one of the kind of the special gifts of being a human is like people can see our light, but there's also like no one's pushing you to fulfill your purpose. It's kind of like you got to find your own way. Like there's a certain, you know, journey here that I think is kind of respected that we're all uncovering our own way, at least a lot of humans I find respect that, that sentiment.
Absolutely. And something you mentioned about this light, right? I was sitting in the airport, flight was delayed, which has been something that's very common here in the Chicago airspace. And I kind of was just sitting off to myself because even though you probably are like, Lisa is very extroverted, Lisa is omnivert, right? I'm
Mm,
extroverted when I'm out, um, when I am away, I'm introverted. But so I was sitting kind of like off to the side in the Atlanta airport, which is very, very busy. And so was just sitting there reading. You mentioned several authors that I actually read. I actually have, just to show you how this is not pre-planned. I have Louise Hay's
oh, beautiful.
flashcards. But I was just sitting there, just sitting there in the corner, minding my own business. And the lady asked me, "Why are you so happy?" She's like, "There's this glow that is all over you." And I'm like, I've been up for like 6, 7, 8 hours. It's like probably 9 a.m. at that point. Flight wasn't going to leave for another like 5 hours. Couldn't get another flight out. But I always bring something to read. And so she said, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "I'm a motivational speaker." She was like, "I can totally get that. Just your ambiance, right?" And I'll tell you something that's funny, Nathaniel. Last Friday, I spoke at a conference, and when you're presenting, you have your hair and all the things done, right? And so I was leaving the same day after I spoke. And so I literally just pared my appearance down to the bare minimum. And so I was getting some tea at the station at the hotel, and the lady heard me speak. She was like, Dr. Campbell, is that you? I said, yeah. She said, oh my gosh. She said, if you wouldn't have opened your mouth to place your order, I wouldn't have known that that was you. But I literally just stripped myself of all of the stage presence to just really be comfortable in my own skin. And many of us don't take the time to learn who we are as individuals because we're so busy being everything to everybody else.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you miss out on the best parts of you.
Mm, mm. Wow. I mean, that's really profound. So it sounds like a beautiful bridge question to ask. I think this is what you specialize in terms of helping people with their growth. So how does one make the room and the space to get to know ourselves on a deeper level, would you say, Lisa?
So for me, there was a couple of things. Number one, we always talk about self-care, and everybody defines self-care as haircuts, shaving, right? Nails, facials, all the things. And I too, for a long time, that I thought that those were my forms of health of self-care. But what I realized, my truest form of self-care is making sure that I'm okay
Mm,
mentally.
mm,
And how I did it was spending some time with myself, going to Starbucks, having a cup of tea with a piece of paper and just writing down every emotion that I'm feeling, right?
mm,
And once I started to look down at the paper and saw the different emotions that I was feeling, that's when I realized that we hold on to things that don't serve us.
mm,
And some things are difficult, like having a house full of kids, and then one by one, they go to college.
mm.
And then now the house is empty. My husband had empty nest syndrome bad. I was just like, I am so glad they are gone, right? Because you're in that parent mode and you miss out on the you mode, which
Mm,
then makes you stuck.
mm.
Now, because we only got, I don't know how long we have for this show, I'm not going to really get deep into some of the things that I've seen.
Yeah.
But one in particular is around employment. During the pandemic, I had several leaders come to me, high functioning leaders come to me saying that they were miserable. And how did they get to that point? Funny thing, they said, I heard you speak at a conference and you talked about how many of us pull up in our cars or log on to Teams, but before that, we've been crying and we're
Mm,
so anxious about the concept of going to work. And she said that it hit her one morning when she realized that she hated that job. She was not being treated with respect by many stakeholders within the organization, but at the same time she was like, they pay me really well.
mm,
And
mm.
so you know what I said to her, Nathaniel? I said, and this is something I said in my former full-time job, I can no longer allow myself to be held hostage by salary and benefits
Yeah. Yeah.
because that salary and benefits was not the only game in town.
Mm,
But because, that other person had been working there for 20 years, this is where I'm supposed to be till I retire. Maybe not,
mm,
maybe not. And you have to really start to look internally. That requires cutting off all the noise. For me, it's getting away from this office, right? Because this office is a signal to my brain that I need to work. But if I need to do some deep thinking, Starbucks, the public library, just get a private room. And
mhm,
literally, and I'm going to be honest with your audience, some of the times in those private spaces, I was writing and crying. I was crying because I was hurt that I allowed myself to hold on for so long. And
mm,
I kept asking myself, Lisa, what are you afraid of? And then I wrote a list of
mm,
all the things I was afraid of. And then looking at the list, I'm like, well, that's not really that bad. You made up in your mind that
mm.
that was a bad thing, when in actuality, it wasn't. And I needed to let go of those things so that I could grow and have this glow. Oh, that rhymes. I need to write that down
I
somewhere.
love it. I love it. I mean, and I feel like it's a beautiful reflection of who you are. And it's interesting that how fear can hold us hostage. I know in different areas of my life that certainly has been the case. And often it's been around things that I love to do. And so, like whether it's making art or playing music or spending time in nature, I find that you were talking about like when we are in certain identities, we'll prioritize everyone else's needs and we'll even take abuse to whether it's to prove our worthiness or all these subconscious beliefs that we may have taken on or been conditioned to believe about ourselves. It really is a journey to like uncovering. I find it's interesting synchronistically, this concept of writing has come up several times, and especially in the last 24 hours for me, this idea of how important it is to actually get a pen and paper and write. And I feel like there's something magical that happens through the writing process. I mean, Julia Cameron talks about this in The Artist Way of like just doing these uh, essentially consciousness dumps by doing, she calls them morning pages. I find that when I'm really in good flow, that's part of it. But the writing process and really getting honest, self-honest through that process and letting go, there's something that happens. And I feel like more important now than ever, because so many people are relegating their thinking and their writing to a generative, to generative AI models and things. And I feel like this is an important conversation that others need to realize that whatever that magic is that allows us to connect the dots and see ourselves clearly, like you said, like these fears are not that they're not that bad. Like I can face these things. I've overcome more. I feel like making time for that is a big answer to the question of how do we give ourselves that space to get to know ourselves better. I think that's a key. What would you say?
You spot on. And so let me just also add on for your listening viewing audience. Writing may not be your thing. If you are a talker, this is also what I did because I'm actually into both. I opened up Zoom, I turned the camera off, I hit record, and I just started speaking how I was feeling.
Mm,
I was speaking and crying. And funny thing, the end result was I had actually started writing a book
wow.
because I realized that there were things that happened 30 years ago that I never had an opportunity to unpack. And so speaking to the computer, no one else was in the house. Speaking to the computer was very freeing for me. It started me
Mm,
on a healing journey to the extent once I realized I was writing a book, I was then it would just hit me in random places. My husband and I were
mm,
driving to an event that was an hour away, and I felt something, and so I told my husband, "Turn the music off." And then I just hit the record button on my phone, crying, bawling my eyes out, and then eventually was speaking. And again, even though I focus on women, him seeing me go through
mm,
that changed him. I didn't
mm,
even realize that he was being changed as a result of what I was going through. And that's when I really knew that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. But that writing is so therapeutic. The other thing that I do, let me tell you, for your high functioning folks, Friday night is the end of the work week for most of us, right? We have Saturday and Sunday off. And one of the things I do Friday before I unplug is brain dump everything that I'm thinking about.
mm,
And I do that because my husband travels during the week. And so when he gets back home, on Friday mornings, I want to be able to be the best version of myself
mm,
for him when we have our date night. And so dumping all of that stuff out of my brain, right? And it's just like random sentences. Think about this. Think about that allows me to then enjoy my weekend. The
mm,
previous version of me was on 7 days a week. That was not healthy
mm.
because in retrospect, I realized the body is keeping the score. The
Yeah.
mind is keeping the score. And I want to be over 100 like my granddad.
Yeah.
And his model, let me just tell you, the number one thing he said that kept him here all of those years was that he loved everyone and he
Mm,
treated everyone the same, no matter how much or how bad they treated him. He
yeah.
always just loved everyone. And
Yeah.
so I do the same thing. I'm like talking to random people in the airport. If I see somebody, if I make eye contact with you, I have to say hello. And
Yeah.
I'm not, there are parts of other US that they say that they're very I can't think of warm. Us in the Midwest, we're kind of like go, 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 go. And since I'm no longer the go, 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 go person, anytime I see someone, I make eye contact with them. I'm like, good morning, how are you? They probably think this lady is crazy.
Yeah.
But really, really, more often than not, there will be people who will say, I'm doing great. How are you? Thank you
Mm.
so much for asking me how I
Yeah.
was doing. Because
Yeah.
people could live in spaces where no one is asking them how
Yeah.
they feel, how their day was.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the my favorite question to ask anyone I would meet, whether it's a cashier or someone, and I think I might have even asked you first thing. I'm not sure if I did. Just what's your favorite thing about today? And I feel like so few people like most people ask how are you doing, which is a confusing question if you really break it down to the nuts and bolts. How are you doing? Most people don't even know how they're lifting their hands, let alone how they're really doing. You know, but you also reminded me, and so this idea of making people important and also helping them to focus on what they're grateful for is important to me. Because I do feel that we are all important, and I feel like my quest has been about looking at the interconnection of all of life, asking some of the deeper philosophical questions around consciousness and the symbiotic nature of our planet and evolution and what is spiritual enlightenment. And I've had some really interesting experiences. Happy to share if you want to know. But at the heart of it is something that I was listening to Earl Nightingale talk about, and I think you just exemplified it really well. That everyone is the most important person in the world. And that's especially true for themselves. And I feel like this isn't about selfishness. It's really about recognizing this that the role of the self and that we all have a self that carries us through the journey back home to whoever we truly are. And when we take time to honor one another, like you are the most important person in the world. That is especially true for you, even though we are having this, happen chance meeting, whether it's on the street or a few moments, in at some service interaction, or we're here doing a deeper podcast. You are important, and I feel like that's always made sense to me on some level. I've put it in the words of like everyone is interesting to me, whether
Hmm.
whether they think they are or not. I feel like everyone as a unique individual, this is what makes humankind truly really beautiful to me. Is like all of us are so unique. Our paths, whether we think we're on a spiritual path or not, I think we're all spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. That's my perspective. But everyone has had a very unique journey that has led them to this now moment of their expression. And even if it's a hard moment they're in, I have this part of me that knows that there's this hidden part of them that eventually when they return and remember it and really get a clear reflection, maybe it's in someone smiling to them, maybe it's someone asking them, spending time and seeing how they what's really going on, that there's something that's beautiful that is waiting to get our attention and is very patient and very kind. And we have words for it, but words never do the justice of it, right? But that presence that you're talking about, Lisa, is really important. Just being the light, being that presence with people, it's invaluable. I really do believe it is.
Yes. And once you start to do that inner work, again, I'm not a therapist. I like to tell everybody I am not a therapist. That's very important because when I meet with coaching clients, my whole model is about shedding,
Mm,
really identifying what is no longer serving you.
mm,
And it seems like during the pandemic, there was this, after the pandemic, the after effect was here, let me just use Chicago as an example. People drive so fast. I'm wondering if everyone is auditioning for the Indy 500 because everybody is driving so fast, right? And then when we're moving about in the airport, I locked eyes with this guy and we locked eyes, right? And I said, so then he looked and then we went around the rope again. And then he stopped me and said, thank you. I needed to slow down.
mm,
And I said, well, honestly, and this was June, right? It's Men's Health Month. And I felt like you were going to really explode. And I'm like, we are going to make it through this line to get through our flight. And if we don't, it's okay.
mm,
I think we're so serious about everything that's going on in our lives that we are unintentionally shortening our lifespan.
Yeah.
And so that's just like my thing. And one last thing I'll tell you, which I think is very important to note. When my grandfather passed, the pharmacies and all these places were calling in about refills. One in particular, even though I asked them to stop the refill, they added another refill because they were so used to seeing him coming to the pharmacy. So my aunt and I, we drove through the drive-through and I said, I would like to cancel a prescription for Edward Campbell. And they were like, why? And so I had to tell them he was no longer here. All of these folks came to the drive-through window. They were crying, like, when are the services? And that right there showed me what can happen if you just love everyone,
Mm-hmm.
because they were genuinely hurt that he was no longer with us. And
Yeah.
so that's my model wherever I'm at. First, I'm always taking care of me, which is why I have to strip down after I speak and put my comfortable clothes on. But when I'm out and about, I make it a mission to say hello to everyone.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to always say how you're doing, because like before we started going live, you asked me how I was doing. I told you I've been sick for the last 2 days. But I came here because I try not to miss an opportunity to be a blessing to others, because that's what makes me happy each and
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. So well said, Lisa. And I really appreciate you have a wonderful attitude. And I think that's one of the most fundamental aspects that we can cultivate in our character through the journey, right? And because the truth is we all go through our ups and downs. We all have to face those fears. We have to take courageous leaps in one way or another. And like they say, the hardest thing that happens to you is the hardest thing that happens to you. Some people it's being in really devastating conflicts, and for other people it's losing a loved one or something. I think too what you said about your grandfather is a really important message too for my contemplation, and for our listeners. I would encourage is this idea of how we impact others in ways that we don't often even know. And I think so many of us are trying to strive, especially if we enter in the entrepreneurial arena or if we're trying to climb these corporate ladders, to have like greater impacts. And we do take ourselves too seriously, when I think what the message I'm hearing from you is if you just be your natural loving self and just be not trying to be anything special other than who you are uniquely and authentically, like you're gonna have those impacts and people are going to feel that void when you're no longer there. And I feel like that's something that would calm the nervous systems of a lot of people and just allow us to find more peace in just being. And this is one of the things that I've loved. My background is in Indigenous wellness, and many things led me to that. I would say I like saying I follow the divine breadcrumbs, and I've taken these like leaps in my life and let go of a lot of these. I've shed those identities as I've gone through all of these leaps. And one of the things I always appreciated about being in circle, the elders there in the circle, we're all there on the same level. And there's usually something that symbolizes our interconnection and our great creator that's at the center of it. Even if it's just space or a talking stick or a drum. And I feel like when we're all recognizing that innate value that we have as human beings, we can just kind of allow ourselves to relax and just be. And that's not always present in this Western world that's in this like go hustle. Like people are running to the future. They don't even know where they're going, but they're sure they have to get there, and it's a rush, and so taking those moments to like, I love how you said that too. You didn't stop someone and be like, you got to breathe, buddy. You just breathe. And the message was received. And I feel like, imagine, I sometimes I like to think we had this one of the moments that led to the birth of Lightheart Vision was the birth of our daughter. And we had a natural home birth, and I had the opportunity of catching her. And it was the most palpable, visceral miracle that I ever experienced on a deep level in my body. Because I talked for years, in looking at contemplating the interconnection of life and just the amazing miracle that the body is. I mean, we barely even comprehend digestion, let alone how we are born from a seed and an egg and become essentially a trillionaire of cells. But catching her and realizing like new life and this just astounding miracle of it all that is born from love, it really made me deeply interested in that moment of miraculous wonder that I so vividly remember experiencing so many of these moments as a child, and then going through those leaps. I've had other experiences of this too, and I've wondered, what if there was a moment where all of us as human beings return to that state of rejoicing in the wonder of it all? How would our earth transform if just for one moment we all made a point to really feel at home in ourselves, to let go of all those false identities, that really witnessed the true miracle of ourselves and one another? I think a moment could change the whole landscape. That's just this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
So one thing I want to say, I'm hearing that somebody is probably a daddy's girl. Uh,
Right now, I think she's still a mommy's girl, but you know what she loves to do with me, Lisa? She loves to spin. And
mm,
she's like, she gets on the tire swing with other children like double her age, and I go in the middle and I whip her around as fast as she can, then I spin it, and the other children are always like, oh, it's too fast, so I slow it down for them, but she's always like faster. And it started with me just putting her on and spinning her around, and she loved the sensation of movement. So yeah, we definitely have our bond, but I don't think I can ever compete with Mama, to be honest.
well, we'll see. I'm the firstborn, and definitely a daddy's girl. The week after I got married, I called my father and I was like, "Hey, Dad, such and such is not working over at my house." And so then he says, "Well, what did Paul say about that?" So, what do you mean? What did Paul say about that? I'm asking you. He was like, "Lisa." Okay, so I'm definitely a daddy's girl. And luckily, I did marry someone who knows how to fix all the things in the house. And so, but I really I like the story of you catching your daughter and the symbolization of life, right? And I think as older people, we forget the things we loved when we were younger. So, for example, we didn't even have this conversation, but it's very obvious that both of us like to read.
Mhm.
And so I actually have a podcast where I interview authors, right?
Oh,
Um,
amazing.
but I love reading. And when I was younger, I read those love stories. Now I am all self-help books, right?
Mm.
Anything that feeds my mind, my body, my soul, that's what I'm reading. And when I get stuck in the airport, I always have a book that I can pull out and read and pass the time, even if it's, 10 hours like it's been lately with my delays. But if you would have asked me 10 years ago, would I be here? I would have told you no,
Mm.
because I had no clue what my future was going to look like. And I thought it was just going to be about healthcare and medical coding stuff. And
Mm.
once I really tapped into what my true zone of genius is, another book by Gay Hendricks, that's when I realized that, yes, I might have been helping people before, but now it's going to be next level
Mm.
because I've done the work for myself. So now that I'm in the perfect position to help others. And I think many of us
Mm.
are afraid to evaluate ourselves. Like, for example, for all the corporate folks, right? Your organization does an annual or every 2 years strategic plan, right? And from the strategic plan, they come up with all the goals and objectives. I believe that everyone should do a personal strategic plan,
Mm.
personal goal setting with systems in place to help you reach those goals. And another strategy that I used, and once I started doing that, I was like, yeah, let's get rid of this, get rid of that. It even got as serious as downloading my bank statements and looking at subscriptions that I was paying for. Yeah, you haven't been on that Peloton in 4 years. Check. Let's cancel that, right? But it literally resulted in me just transitioning internally, which has allowed me to help others when I'm not even trying to help them. I'm
Mm.
just being me.
Mm.
And me this version of me, I equate to the 5-year-old version of me who had no fear, who walked home from school one day when she's usually picked up by her father. Her father overslept. And so she's like, well, if the car goes this way, I'll just walk this way. No fear. There is no way today that I would encourage a child to do that in the Chicagoland area, right? Just stay at the building, right? But as we get older, I think we become fearful of trying new things and we get set. And I am here for everything that life has to offer to me, and whatever ways I can be of service to others. That's literally what I'm here for on this earth. I know in my heart and my soul.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for expressing all of that. And I can see that in you, that heart of service. And I appreciate you being, to me, especially those who have come to be of service in such a profound way, Lisa, it really is a leap of courage. I believe on a soul level we intend, and we're actually going through a point of great transformation right here on the planet. I mean, not only does like every indigenous prophecy that I've been exposed to talk about these times is a great time of change. I mean, it's also from the Western, doctrines and things as well, and we can see it, right? I mean, with all the emergence of these profoundly world-changing technologies that we're seeing, I feel like we're also seeing a up-leveling of consciousness. And whether I'm having conversations about consciousness that I wanted to have when I was like a preteen with people, but they just were not able to discuss. And now I'm finding I'm having these conversations with people from all walks of life, corporate to, to creatives, to parents, and I don't know if it's just that we're exposed to more information and are doing this, or they're actually, I feel like there's an actual energetic shift that's happening. I I love that you brought up Gay Hendricks. That book, The Big Leap, was a very like s- um, a very good synthesis of these concepts that I have seen kind of play out in a lot of ways. And this concept, because you talked about it earlier, you recognized, you saw yourself in your identification as working in the medical model. And I also worked in a healthcare center, and I led a seniors indigenous team. So I've been around the clinical models and I've seen the medical models, and I have my opinions about a lot of these kind of ways that we create authority relationships. And anyways, I think there's a lot to be said there. But my point was that you saw, like, you were in your zone of excellence. You could have done that job and retired and probably had a good pension and everything, but you weren't in your zone of genius. And he talks about that in that book, right? And how it's such a different paradigm. It's not about being a little bit better. It's about like it's a whole multiple, it's a whole quantum leap of the truth that we come here to express. And I, you know, I'll tell you a little bit out of the box. For me, I had some spiritual experiences that started happening in my late teens and early 20s that made me realize like my scientific lens of seeing the world was limited, especially since it was so bound in the senses, because I had some experiences that were beyond my regular senses. And a lot of it happened from contemplating just the nature of reality and what brings all this into being. What's the first cause? And all these questions I had. Um, and I believe our potential as human beings and as a species is so beyond what we can even imagine. I feel like children like Luciana and other children we were talking about before the show, like they're coming in with such bright lights and strong wills, and I feel like they're challenging us to rise to the occasion. Like we really need that level of presence and care and devotion to our service in a way that I feel like we've never had. And I think it's bound to bring up a lot of fear in us too.
Hmm.
So for someone who is experiencing like this call to like rise into their purpose and to shine their light, maybe there's being said, hey, you got to do YouTube videos and share your voice, or you got to get on the stage like Lisa and present, or you're here to be a coach, or you're here to be an author. But that fear holds people back. What would you say to that individual?
So there's a couple of things. So number one, I realize that fear can be very paralyzing. And when I was contemplating resigning from that job, I was afraid. And my CPA, certified public accountant, Crystal, said to me one day, you got to execute faith over fear, right? She had been my accountant since 2009. And so it was 2022. And she's like, you have to exercise faith over fear. And what I realized her saying that was, yes, I allowed fear to paralyze me. And the shift for me, so first of all, let me just say this, I do have visions of future things that happen in my life. And honestly, every time they come to fruition, it's scary because I'm like, because at first it doesn't hit me. And then
Mm,
I sit back and I say, you dreamed about that a few years ago.
mm,
So 3 years ago, and this is what I mean by taking the first step. 3 years ago, it was 3 a.m. I was asleep. I woke up. And I believe that my higher power, God, spoke to me and said, if you take the first step, I'll carry you the rest of the way.
mm,
And that message gave me permission to go ahead and submit the resignation letter.
mm,
And what was holding me back from doing it was being comfortable. Was I was fearful, like what's going to happen to my bills? And so allowing yourself to first you got to acknowledge, yeah, I'm afraid to do XYZ, right? And once you acknowledge it, start to work through what it would mean you being on the other side. So for me, and I have to say this because I grew up in a Christian household, and in our household, you didn't go to therapy. You didn't have a coach. All you did was pray. And as I got older, I realized you need a therapist to help you unpack, right? You need a coach, you need some type of community. And so for me, getting around others who were professional speakers in the entrepreneurial space, that helped me feel comfortable. But comparison is truly the thief of joy because
mm,
I thought that because these folks presented like all things, it was all good. I realized that I was the only one that had taken the big leap
mm,
and that I had quit my job. So
mm,
sometimes this space is a little lonely, which is why you have to get these tools put on your tool belt so that the days you're feeling down, it's like, oh, I need to just go sit outside and write. Oh, I need to go for a walk. Oh, I need to send a message to someone who maybe I can have a conversation with them, right? Just all of
mm,
these different strategies. And for me, it's not a one size fits all solution. It's just depending on how I'm feeling in the moment. Some of the things my system is set up where I have to like dump that stuff from my brain. But if you're sitting here listening to us and you're thinking like, what do I do now? The first thing you need to do is pause and stop thinking
mm,
because all that noise that you allow to be in your space is energy that's tugging away at you. So first you need to just stop. This drives my husband crazy because he'll ask me a question and he's used to me responding immediately. And now I have this intentional pause where I'm thinking about, is this something that I need to say right now? Is it something that's going to hurt him? How do I say it so that he receives it as opposed to him being offended by
mm,
what I'm saying? So that same pause, I do it myself and I do it quite frequently. It
mm,
could be, this is crazy. I will be in the pool for water aerobics. I go to water aerobics 10 a.m. every day. And I can be in the pool and the teacher's up there and we're doing our moves and things start to hit me. And I kind of zone out for a minute and then I get back in flow with whatever we're doing. But I'm allowing myself to go on this journey and not be on the journey that my parents were on.
mm,
Work, retire, and then you die. And my mother said to me the other day, retirement is not that glamorous. So I'm thinking at 53, message received, retirement is
mm,
not that glamorous if you don't set yourself up
mm.
for retirement. And I don't think in my family, we weren't taught about retirement. We were just
Yeah,
taught get a job and retire. What does that really mean?
yeah,
Nothing.
yeah. Well, it's interesting. The word retire literally translates to death, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like when you're really in your flow, in your essence, in your purpose, however you want to say it, like to me, I don't envision a day where I don't want to be of service in one way or another. And I'm sure that's gonna take many iterations and evolutions on my journey, but I never want to just sit on a beach and have, I mean, I don't I don't drink anyways, but like sit on a beach and watch the waves. Like I'd rather like come and, have beach experiences, but then mountain experiences and then community experiences and then be around children and really continue to shine. And I feel like many of us who are called to this kind of life of service are, there is no end. And I think, it's interesting. Okay, so I'll just, I'll say this because I come from a very secular family, very unreligious, very, I would say that maybe nature was like the spirituality, but even on, it was almost like this distant, like one day I'll go fishing kind of thing. When I have to stop working, my dad's in a position now, he could probably be fishing every day, but he's still working like landscaping and stuff. And because he's that workhorse kind of builder. But this idea that there's something beyond calling us. And I think it's our most important relationship in life because it's reflected in all of our relationships. Our relationship with our creator, however we relate to it, is at the heart of our journey, right? Because I don't think there's anything we could do without that supportive life force, that genius that's really within us guiding us. I mean, I don't even think I would have. I don't know how I grew a hand, how alone I could lift a hand. Like I have no conscious awareness of creating this, right? So, what a fundamental relationship to develop, and then if it grew us and it also provided all of our needs and our fulfilled our it heals us when we injure ourselves, all these things it provides. It's funny that we get to a point where we start covering ourselves with these fears and having all these doubts about things when it's provided us all along. But I feel like the more that we kind of close ourselves to it, the heavier life can get.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, you're a living testament, in the reflection. Like you came on the podcast saying I'm 53 and you're a vibrant health, you're beautiful, you're glowing. And to me, that's because you stepped through that veil. If you were still a medical person but had, like maybe some of your peers, decided I'm going to be a speaker on the side, but I'm still going to be that administrative CEO. I doubt you would have such a glow about you. I doubt you would have
Mm.
that rootedness in your faith and your state of appreciation of that journey.
Wow, Nathaniel. So let me just tell you this. I love these authentic, non-scripted conversations. So I started speaking professionally in 2003, and I spoke about all things medical, right? And so 2023 is when I shifted into solely motivational speaking. And it's different when I'm on stage now. It's
Mm,
it's totally different. How I deliver the content, the emotions behind it, the energy that I bring behind it, it's different.
mm,
It's so different that it's scary, but it makes sense that it's happening this way because of another dream that I had about me being on this stage. And so it hasn't happened yet, but I realized that how I'm navigating this journey today, I'm planting the seeds in the soil of my future
mm,
as opposed to just watering my past.
mm.
And that past, I look back and I'm like, Lisa, what took you so long? It was fear. It
Yeah.
was fear that was holding me back. And just for the benefit of the listening, viewing audience, I have to be transparent and say that quitting a full time job, closing my healthcare consulting business, took away majority of our household income. I've been in this house for 21 years. The mortgage has been paid every month, right? Maybe not at the first of the month, like the bill says, but before the next month starts, the mortgage is paid. We haven't gone hungry. And I believe it's truly attributed to me taking that first step.
Mm, mm,
It's a little messy after you take that step, but if your mindset is I am going to win, yes, you will win. Will it be a perfect win? No, nothing in life is perfect. But when you step into this new version of yourself, you're going to realize you like yourself even more. Like I've always
yeah.
loved myself, but now I'm like, I like Lisa. She's pretty cool.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And it's interesting to me that that seems to be one of the biggest like through lines in terms of the story of humankind, is we aren't we're least kind too often ourselves. And I find that is interesting when you really step back and look at it. It's like, why are we so self-critical and self-judging and not our best friends? Because you think of anyone you want to be best friends with, it's going to be yourself. Some people are just naturally gifted at this. They like make I think they make like a firm decision in their childhood, like no one's going to hear me, but it's far and few in between that have that depth, and that can become, other maybe unhealthy expressions, whether it's narcissistic or whatever. But I really feel like that genuine care and authentic love and appreciation of who we are is like we are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones that we've
Hmm.
been looking for, and it's almost like it's part of the cosmic joke. It's like, haha, you forgot you're your best friend, and then we get to re-wake up to it at some point, and it does require that leap into the unknown to kind of come to that place, it seems. It's like you
Hmm.
cannot be the small version of yourself and still be your best friends, because it's almost like intuitively we know we're meant for more, and until we will allow ourselves to have it and to live into it, um, it's like almost impossible, because it's like, how can you be a best friend with a friend that's not really being a friend?
Hmm.
That's kind of the sense
Hmm.
I'm getting.
And do you know how to be a friend?
Yeah, good question. What to you is what makes you your best friend to yourself, Lisa?
That I care about my overall well-being.
Mm,
30 years ago, I had an incident in my life, and I realized that I never took the time to unpack that incident. It was almost like nobody in my family talked about it. It was almost like it was filed away in the do
mm,
not recall folder of
mm,
life. And when you file those things away in those folders, they prevent you from living
mm,
out the best version of yourself because you just kind of bury it. And I've taken the time to not only understand me, but understand like genetically why I do the things I do, why I do say the things that I say. And I'm just amazed, like, oh, that's something that my uncle would say. And it's like I'm understanding myself better from by understanding them, but then I'm also taking away some things that I need to give to my children, even though they're
mm,
adults. I believe I have a responsibility to share with them some experiences and how I'm feeling and be vulnerable with them so
mm.
that they don't get to 53 and it's like, why didn't they tell us this? Right. And so
Yeah,
I'm breaking away at some of the generational stuff and
yeah,
then trying to correct the future
yeah,
as best as I can.
yeah. That intergenerational piece I think is so important, and I feel like it's another. I don't want to say lie, but I feel like it's a belief that we have this limited ability, like we're just this. I mean, we're told this in a lot of ways about humankind. About I think it comes from like dogmatic materialism that just sees us as this speck of dust that's this random chemical organization, and to me there's two extremes, right? There's this like high level of science, but people identify as scientific materialism, and then there's this whole like you were saying, like just pray and God will take care of everything. And I feel like there's this real in between of those things where like science can be a profound way of understanding the depths and the mystery of it all and communicating all the things that were realized, like epigenetics and like quantum physics allows us to talk about things I don't think previous generations would have even ever imagined about reality. And um the in between is really, I think, comes down to mastery. And I feel like there have been many masters on the planet. Um, Christ actually appeared to me in my early 20s in the forest as just pure
Mm,
light. And it's interesting because I've had a very unique journey with him and his presence. And I even to a point where it's not that I don't like considering myself Christian. I have different belief sets where I study the Christ letters, and in my own relationship with him, I actually had memory of being in that life, witnessing his crucifixion. As crazy as that sound, it was during a Buddhist meditation. I had visions, and I was in the crowd witnessing this, and it deeply affected me, that remembrance, and it led me on a quest. And it's actually what led me to work with indigenous people, and like why did he appear to me, and like I believe in science. I believe in like this understanding that a universe is understandable. And as awkward as sometimes this conversation is about beliefs and about religions, I feel like whether it's culture or religions or beliefs, I feel like these are the things that can divide us from one another, because we
mhm.
you know the if you ascribe like I'm part of this belief system or I'm part of this culture, and it can, in a way, it can separate you from others, where I feel like the root principles of all of it, like growth, for instance, so you specialize in growth. Have you ever met a human being that is like, no, you know what, I'm not about growth, I'm about standing still and that's it? It's like a part of us all wants to grow, just like a part of us all wants to be happy, we all want to be healthy, we all want to feel loved and be significant. So it's like I feel like all the masters, whether it's Jesus or Buddha or all the ascended masters, they all come and taught us something very important about this mastery. It's like the truth and our relationship with our creator, and then being that in the world. And I feel like um, you are a really light, and I see that in you. Like you show up, and the way you present yourself, Lisa. I know I'm bringing some things out of the woodwork here that are maybe a little odd. Like, what are you talking about, Nathaniel? And I'm just like normalizing it, but it's been a part of my everyday life. These experiences that have been really miraculous and hard to sometimes contextualize.
Hmm.
But anyways, it's
I
part
get
of my
it.
neurodivergent mind there. I just went all over the place.
I totally get it. And on my podcast, I've had an opportunity to interview authors where their perspectives, their beliefs were different than mine, and understanding or learning about their beliefs and things that they do has really opened my mind. I never thought a podcast would do that. I was
Mm.
just doing a podcast, everybody else was doing a podcast, right? But it changed me to
Mm.
the extent that I'm like, I'm going to do my podcast until I retire, die.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I meet you there, Lisa. I've really, and I'm very thankful to Julia. She was the mastermind behind, getting us all the beautiful guests like yourself to come on the show, setting up a lot of the technical things that just were a little bit challenging for me, in some of my skill sets. And it has been one of the most rewarding ways of connecting with people, of having these like authentic inflow conversations, you know, recognizing like I mean, there's so many beautiful, competent, like inspired and inspiring people like yourself who are just doing this beautiful work that, in days gone before the era of podcasts, we would have never known that these people even existed unless
No.
they wrote a book, and unless you had the chance of getting that book. It's like we're so much more connected now. I mean, it's
Hmm.
magic, right? Like we're talking through a screen. We're probably at least maybe like 500 kilometers away from each other, if not more. And instantaneously we're having a conversation about
Hmm.
really amazing things. What has been your like biggest takeaway as a podcast host? What's the thing that really ignites you?
Well, so first of all, the name of my podcast is 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. And so I
Mm.
interview a different author each week.
Okay.
And I think my biggest takeaway is that we are all on this journey for something.
Mm.
Some of us have figured out what our something is. Some of us are just here for the journey. Like me, I don't know what the end result is going to be, but I know I'm a better person since I've been able to connect with all these folks. Again, no prep meetings. They fill out the form. We come into a room like this, we
Yeah.
chat, and then, we're done. But different things that they've said
Mm.
has opened my eyes to a lot of things. And we don't even have enough time to discuss all the things, but I know that I'm a better person
Yeah.
as a result of connecting with all of you, no matter how we connect. And you're right. Like I've only been to Canada twice. So what are the chances that we would have run into each other and have had this dialogue, right?
Yeah, it's truly it really is a blessing that we're able to, I think, through resonance, meet one another. I feel like, Gary Vee talked about this. I saw him talk in front of a whole group of marketers. He's like, social media is dead. And they're all like, he's like, you guys are all going to have to get new jobs or evolve. And he said, interest media is now the thing, and that's all about resonance, right? So when you talk about authors, it's interesting because we've had several authors on our show too. I love books. I wouldn't even say I've self-published. I've written some guidebooks, and I am. I have a whole chronicles that I've been working on for a while. It's about several moments of my life. One of those moments is our daughter's birth, and it's a memoir chronicles, and it talks about lighthearted vision. So maybe one day when I finally publish it, I'll put a request to come on the show because I'd love to talk to you about authorship and writing and how important it is.
Not if you publish it,
Oh yeah, you
when
caught
you
me
publish it. Yes,
red-handed.
when you publish it.
Okay, when
I
I publish
actually,
it.
funny thing, that's actually a lot of times how it happens. On someone's podcast and they have this book in them that they just kind of been holding on to. And one of the things I realized is that, yes, we write the books. For me, my memoir was very healing, but I also realized that it wasn't about me. It was about me
Mm,
being of service to others,
yeah.
especially those individuals who said, I read your book.
Mm,
I would have never known that you went through what you went through because you definitely are not wearing that version of yourself. And so
mhm,
that has freed them up to tell their stories. And I
mhm.
believe we all have a story in us.
Yeah.
And I wish we would be vulnerable to tell our stories because I'm about breaking
Yeah.
the generational trauma. And I think we can't do that unless we're honest. We have to be honest with ourselves and with others. That's how you grow.
Yeah. So powerful and important. And I feel like we're in this really interesting in between. Like you talked about the creation cycle of like the deconstruction, the void, and creation. And then there's like the sustenance as well. And I feel like we are really in this interesting intersection, almost between these very divergent generations. Like my parents and their parents are like, depression, World War generations, like very isolated. Then baby boom, and I was looking like at some of the abundance that my parents got to experience in their like I was looking at how cars were built and everything was built quality. You could buy a house basically for the salary, like a middle class salary for of a year. Like things were a lot more available to a lot of people, depending on obviously where you were in the world. And now I feel like we're in this kind of like crunch period where it's like people are feeling this different kind of pressure, and there's still like
Mhm.
this huge influence of baby boomers that are like leading a lot of like maybe the political landscapes. And then there's also this resurgence of all these like really interesting forward thinkers like this, like Nikolai Tesla. Like no one was talking about him when I was a boy. And then my preteens, I started learning about him. And then people like Walter Russell, and maybe you don't know, from Virginia, he's like an interesting character. And then people like Buckminster Fuller, who talked about like futurists where we've already shown scientifically that scarcity is not real. So that like changes the whole marketing paradigm. It changes the whole political conversations. Like we don't have to choose between these two fighting models if there's more than enough for everyone. We can all
Mhm.
actually enjoy. Anyways, all we're in this interesting time. So what I wanted to say is I really appreciate you in your essence as a healer of generational wounds. I am with you in that. Working with indigenous communities in particular, I saw a lot of intergenerational trauma happening continuously, and a lot of people are rising. I feel like within their family lines, within their ancestral lines, to heal those things so we don't pass it forward. So thank you for that
Mhm.
work, Dr. Lisa. I know we've gone over our time here. I want to be respectful of you. Is there anything in particular that's burning for you to talk about before I ask you how people can connect with you best?
Yes, one thing I will say is don't be afraid to take the first step.
Mm,
It is scary, but it is so worth it. And is it easy? No. Do I still cry? I'm just a crier. I think I cry to just release things that are, have me feeling a certain kind of way. But you owe you to take that first step because if you don't, you will forever wonder, what if, right?
mm,
So that's been my thing. I'm taking the
yeah,
first step. I'm taking, they call us risk takers, right?
yeah,
But I'm just a growth seeker. I'm all
mm,
about seeking what's the next thing for me to have the greatest impact.
yeah. And that's, in terms of growth, you have to go into that. You have to, see what your upper limit is, right? From Gay Hendricks, and you have to stretch your comfort zone. It's the only way to grow, right? And we can't have it both ways. We can't like just stay in our safety and comfort and grow. So that's where the risk comes in. I really appreciate your perspectives in so many ways, Lisa. I would love to know how people can connect with you, and also yeah, and I have another important question for you.
Okay. So you can reach me at Dr. Lisa L. Campbell on all social media platforms. My website is Dr. Lisa L. Campbell. So I have, yeah, all the channels. YouTube, I got a YouTube channel, which grew when I wasn't even trying to grow it. I was just
Amazing.
being me. I was just being me and it grew. So
That's
that's
amazing.
proof about how you can water something and watch it
Mhm.
grow. But at Dr. Lisa L. Campbell is where you can find me. Just Google me across the world.
I love it. I love your energy, and your passion is very apparent to me. And yeah, you shared so much wisdom. So I look forward to going and re-listening to this again as well. And I do love to ask our inspiring guests, Dr. Lisa, and you've been such a light here today. If you had a megaphone and you could talk to everyone in the world, you may have already even answered this in the conversation, but if everyone could hear you, what would you share?
Let go. I was getting louder. My husband says, "You're so loud." Okay,
You can be
because
loud.
I get so he's not home, so I can get excited.
You could do it.
Let go to grow. Let go to grow. I know it sounds like a cliche type of statement, but truly, if you let go, you will grow. And growth is not like a microwave, right? Where you push a button and 2 minutes later, um, you're done. It's a journey.
It's
Uh-oh,
super is a
hi.
journey, and let go to grow is such a beautiful motto for life, Dr. Lisa. This is Luciana, and you even predicted that we would have a guest appearance. Can you say
Yes.
hi to Lisa? Can you say hi, Lisa?
Hi.
Can't hear.
Oh, you can't hear her. You're right. Here, let me unplug.
Can't hear.
Here now.
See, so smart. Hi.
Can you say hi? She's having a day. We've had an interesting day, Elisa.
Hey, I have three grandsons that are 3, 4, and 6, so I get
Yeah,
it.
you get it,
I
eh?
get it.
What
Yeah.
color is your shirt?
No,
Pink.
Pink, yes.
And what's your favorite thing about today?
no.
No, no. Did you hang out with No, no? Is that your grandpa? Okay. Can you say thanks for watching and thanks for coming on, Dr. Lisa?
She's like, Daddy, I'm over all of this. Just
Yeah.
want you to know.
Baby,
Yeah.
You have a great day too.
baby.
Oh, when they're that small, it's so amazing. So
Oh yeah,
amazing.
there's a lot of magic. It's truly a reflection of how important it is to be in our states of childlike wonder. I think that was one of Christ's most important teachings, right? It's like only through that way of being authentically ourselves, vulnerable. And I want to say one last thing about, because you brought up crying several times, Lisa, and a few grandmothers shared with this to me in many ceremonies. That's been my background for a while, and those tears are such healing. One of the things that they said is you can gather those tears if in tissues and you can bring them to like a sacred fire. But recently I learned if you allow your tears to actually do full circuit and enter back your mouth, there's some chemistry that allows us this like growth of our consciousness in some way. I don't know all the science of it, but I find it's a really interesting and beautiful idea that, it's like we're communicating with ourselves through this release, this letting go that you talk about.
Yes, yes.
You know,
I will cry in the car, in the shower, everywhere. It doesn't matter. I just let them come out. Even on the plane. I found myself crying on the plane.
that's wonderful. You know what? And it's so human. I feel like, talking about those generational wounds that need healing. I know many of our parents' generations, they would hide, and still to this day, especially men, like don't allow yourself to be seen crying and suppress that. But what that does to our wellness, like you said, that holistic wellness we know it's not good for us. So it gives
Hmm.
other people permission to feel when we allow ourselves to cry, like you did with your husband in the car and allowing yourself to get it all out. So I love your message to the world. Let go to grow, and everything you've said. Thank you so much for coming and blessing us with your presence on the Love Pod today.
Thank you for having me.
To all our listeners and to all those you touch, Dr. Lisa, thank you again, and thanks for Thanks for Luciana, the sound effects that we're having at the bottom. I'm gonna actually just close our day today with a just a thank you from Luciana for thanking us all for watching. Is there anything else you wanted to share, Dr. Lisa?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Blessings.
Thanks for watching.
Button.
You say ciao ciao.
Press down. Bye.
I love you so much.